So, a few days back, I had my daughter's parent teacher meeting, and we were discussing few things. And at one point, her teacher said something like, if all the parents come together, raise these concerns, maybe it will reach the higher authorities, maybe it will reach the government, maybe something can actually change. And without even thinking, I said, मैम, नीट जैसे इश्यू का कुछ नहीं हो रहा है तो आपको लगता है इससे कुछ होगा? And she said something that actually stayed with me. Now you understand how it works, ma'am. And I just gave her a nod and I came back home. And I kept thinking about that conversation. Not even so much about what she said, but about my own response. Why was that my immediate reaction? When did I become so convinced that raising an issue, coming together, and asking for something to change probably wouldn't make a difference? And I think that is partly why I have been thinking so much about politics lately. But before I say anything else, let me tell you about me. I'm not a political analyst. I'm not a journalist. I'm not someone who has followed politics for years. I am, the correct word would be immature. I am learning, I am reading more, listening more, questioning more. So sometimes I'll be wrong. Sometimes I'll change my mind. And I hope I never stop doing either. Because I might be wrong about some things. I might be right about others. I don't know yet. And that's okay. I'm still willing to learn. If you know something I don't, tell me. If I have misunderstood something, explain it to me. If you disagree with me, that is okay too. These aren't lectures, these are just conversations. I'm not Team Rahul. I'm not Team Modi either. I'm Team Help Me Understand Better. And now, with that out of the way, let me tell you what's been on my mind. So, I've been watching interviews here and there, and I've been watching press conferences, at times reels, at times shorts, conversation with students, conversations with ordinary people, and I have been talking about all of this with my husband, at times with my cousin. One conversation in particular stayed with me. I was telling my husband about Rahul Gandhi and the interviews I have watched, the conversations with students, the press conferences, the people he meets, and especially the Kashmir to Kanyakumari walk. And my husband said, maybe he's doing all this because he's the opposition. Okay, fair enough. Maybe. Let us actually assume that's true. Maybe his meetings with students are political. Maybe his press conferences are political. Maybe the Kashmir to Kanyakumari walk was political as well. Maybe every bit of it was political. Fine. Then here's my question. If those things help politicians earn people's trust, what is stopping every other politician from doing them too? Why shouldn't every leader answer difficult questions? Why shouldn't every leader sit with students? Why is every leader not having those unscripted conversations? Why shouldn't every leader listen? If meeting people, answering questions, and having conversations help someone in the opposition build credibility, can help someone actually get in the power again, why wouldn't someone already in the power do the same thing? Who is stopping them? And that made me think about what we actually expect from our leaders. Because I don't want to make this about Rahul Gandhi and I don't want to make it about Narendra Modi either. If tomorrow Rahul Gandhi becomes Prime Minister, I hope people question him exactly with the same intensity. Because my loyalty isn't to a political party. It shouldn't be. My loyalty should be to the standards I expect from anyone who asks to lead me, to lead my country. We elected our leaders for a reason, not to worship them, not to defend them no matter what, not to treat criticism of them as criticism of the country. We elected them to lead. which means they owe us accountability, they owe us answers, they owe us communication, they owe us transparency, and we owe ourselves the responsibility to question them. That's not being anti government, that's being a citizen. Another conversation I have been having is about development. So my husband was like, Congress has taken a lot from the country, but Modi, and I was like, okay, so the current government is not doing the same. And he says, maybe, kind of, but Modi has done a lot of development. Okay, maybe he has, but then I ask, what development are we talking about? Because I think there is a difference between development happening and people actually feeling the development in their everyday lives. A government can point to highways, airports, GDP numbers, infrastructure, and a citizen can still ask, has my daily life actually become better? Both conversations can exist at the same time. And questioning one doesn't automatically mean denying the other. I think that is something we need to get better at. We can say, yes, this is good, and still ask, but what about this? We don't have to choose between blind praise and complete rejection. And then there's the thing that has probably been bothering me the most, the NEET protests. Every conversation somehow came back to one sentence. But did you hear the language they used? Yes, I did. Let me tell you, I don't support that abusive language. I never have. I don't think it was right. But how did that become the whole story? There was a paper leak. There were students who had spent years preparing, parents who had invested years of hope, money, time, and sacrifice. There were protests, students, professors, people coming together. Sonam Wangchuk's hunger strike, questions about accountability, leadership, public trust. And somehow, so many conversations seem to have stopped it. Look at the language Gen Z used. Why? Why are we so comfortable discussing the language used by a few, but not equally interested in discussing why thousands of people felt they needed to stand there in the first place? And this is where I keep thinking about selective hearing, the selective perception. We hear what confirms we already believe. We notice what fits the story we already have accepted. 100 things happen, 100 things are said, but somehow we remember the one thing that confirms what we already wanted to believe. Maybe we didn't like Gen Z, so we heard the abusive language. Maybe we already believed that the protest was wrong, so we noticed the worst behavior. Maybe we already supported a particular political party, so we looked for evidence that proved our side was right. And everything else quietly disappeared. That could be dangerous because a complete story becomes one headline, one clip, one slogan, one label, and suddenly that's the whole story. And something else has really bothered me. Why does the conversation suddenly become about girls using abusive language? Yes, girls shouldn't use abusive language, but neither should boys. But why did it suddenly become a cultural crisis when women or girls do it? Women have been raped for decades. Girls have been denied opportunities. Women have died and burned because of dowry. Women have been abused inside their own homes. Were not those enough of a cultural shock? Or have we simply become so accustomed to those things that they stopped shocking us? That question genuinely bothers me because maybe sometimes we don't react to something because it's more important. Maybe we react because easier to judge. And there's one more thing I've started noticing in almost every political conversation, a tiny phrase, two words, at least. At least this government isn't as bad as Congress. At least Modi did this. At least the previous government was worse. At least. And I've started wondering, when did at least become our benchmark? Why are we comparing leaders with the worst thing someone else did instead of asking why they are doing what they should be doing? Why is this the question? At least they are not as bad as the other guy. Why isn't can you do better? Imagine your child comes home with poor marks and says, but at least I scored more than my friend. Would we say, great, that's enough? Probably not. We would ask, but is this your best? So, why do we stop asking that question when it comes to leadership? Why are we setting such a low benchmark for the people we elect? Citizens deserve more than at least. Democracy deserves more than at least. Leadership deserves more than at least. And honestly, we deserve more than at least. So that's my rant. Or maybe it's not a rant. Maybe it's just an amateur trying to understand a very complicated country. I don't know. I know I don't know enough, and I'm okay saying that. I'm going to keep reading, keep listening, keep questioning. And maybe I will change my mind about some of this. That is okay. In fact, I hope I do when I find something that genuinely changes my understanding. But until then, I think I'm allowed to ask questions. And if you think I'm missing something, tell me. If you think I'm wrong, tell me why. But don't just tell me that at least the other side was worse. Give me something that actually makes me think. Because that's what I'm here for. I am team, help me understand better. And maybe that's where the real conversation begins.